First of all, may I ask questions to the two Brazilian panelists? What is your judgment? Now, lower house already decided to impeach President Rousseff, and it's likely the Senate going to vote next month. What's likely to be the decision from the Senate? Mr. Seligman.
Well, actually, we are living in Brazil three big crises. One economic, another political, and the last one is moral and ethical. The economic one ends with the end of the commodity boom. The political one is due our political system, the way that we elected our governments. And the moral one is involved, all the corruption with the Brazilian oil company is involved, among others. On the political side, the problem is that in our system, presidential coalition, the people that is elected for the presidency usually do not have majority in both houses of the parliament. And the way to build up this majority is highly questionable in its legitimacy. The first way is to invite people
Mr. Seligman,
to be part of the
my question for you more is, Mr. Seligman, if I can, my question for you is very direct. That is, what is your sense of the Senate likely to pass the impeachment judgment for President Rousseff? Is it possible? Briefly from you,
yes.
Sir.
Yes, it's possible. It's possible. I think that it will be, because Ms. Rousseff did not show that she has more than 1/3 of the House of Representatives. Now she has to show that she has 50 plus one senator to keep his job.
We understand how it works. We understand how it works in the Senate and also the House, because you need to have the majority in order to get the impeachment. But Mr. Tang, what is your judgment and why?
I believe that because of the overwhelming amount of lawmakers who voted to proceed with the impeachment, I think that this also sends a strong message to the Senate. And I believe that, by Monday, a majority of the Senate will probably okay and allow the impeachment to progress. And if that is the case, she would, of course, have to take a license, or, Temer will assume for 180 days. Now, when it becomes a judgment which will be presided by the President of the Supreme Court of Brazil, it may become more of a technical decision rather than just a purely political decision as it was during the lower house vote.
May I just follow up a bit, Mr. Tang, because it is understood that Ms. Rousseff, even though she could be impeached by both houses, the Senate and the House, she could still appeal to the Supreme Court, as you just said, even though Supreme Court in early records have dismissed her appeal. So how many rows does she still have if the Senate did go ahead with so-called impeachment of her?
Well, you're right in saying that she could appeal, but until now we have seen that the Supreme Court of Brazil does not really want to interfere into an independent power, which is the Congress. They, of course, will settle the rituals and the legal ways of impeachment, but not necessarily become involved directly in the impeachment, except to say whatever measures taken is legal or not legal.
Let me go to you, Ms. Magowan, observing it from the United States. As being mentioned by Mr. Seligman, there are several things all at the same time. One is political confidence of a leadership and possibility of her involved in any kinds of corruption. Secondly is the shrinking economy. And thirdly, of course, is the spreading disillusion inside of Brazil. But any of these is in any way linked to the constitutional relevant law, which might provide legal basis for a president democratically elected to be impeached.
Well, actually, Ms. Rousseff is being impeached not for the corruption, but for the incompetence and for lying before her election, what lent her the election. So legally, she lied to be reelected. So there is a legal cause against that, because what she did is she showed that the country didn't have such a large deficit using the money from government-owned banks. So that constituted like a fraud. Basically, she lied to the entire country to be reelected. I think that is a legal cause for her to at least to start the proceedings of impeachment.
Mr. Tang, inside Brazil, there are enormous amount of debates. So may I just throw in a different opinion coming from Brazil, different from what Ms. Magowan just mentioned. People were suggesting the people that have been accusing her of corruption are actually corrupted themselves. And therefore, what is your judgment of exactly, quote unquote, her guilt? And will that guilt constitute any legal judgment in terms of she should be impeached or not?
Well, I think that the vote yesterday in the lower house vote, it was very clear that she is being impeached for more political reasons, for the the morass, the economic morass, and the political ineptitude of her government. However, technically speaking, this impeachment should basically focus on whether she used the money for the, what we call pedaladas without the congressional approval, rather than a political, in the presidential system, different from a parliamentary system, you can't just vote the prime minister and call a new government. You would have to impeach her, and really being unpopular is not really a reason for impeachment. And even if the economy is not doing well, is also not a reason for impeachment.
Right. Mr. Seligman, what is your sense of what part of her guilt could necessarily constitute for a legal impeachment based on your constitution about the obligations and responsibilities of a president?
In my opinion, technically, there is such a responsibility crime, because the presidency used money from the budget not approved by the Congress, and did that in order to win the election. So the crime is clear in 2014, and it's also clear in 2015, the 2 years in a row. So I think that technically there is reason for that. And political, the reason is clear, because the huge amount of votes against her.
But the question is very interesting. What are the bases for a president to be impeached or not impeached? Is it a popular context? Should the economy be a barometer to be looked at if the Constitution did not state very clearly as to what % of GDP growth if a president cannot achieve, then he or she has to be impeached? That is a very important question for a young democracy like Brazil, which only went its democratic system for 30 years only. Ms. Magowan, what would this mean, the fundamental basis of this impeachment or not, for this young democracy of Brazil?
Well, the underlying motivation, which is, as my colleague said, it's not a direct reason, but it's a strong motivation. It's the state of the economy. There's no question in my mind that if the economy would be going great at this moment in Brazil, we will not be having this impeachment process. And to begin with, she would not have committed the fraud that I mentioned had the economy had been better. They would not have such a large deficit. She would not have an incentive to cover that deficit, cover up that issue, any of that. Now, why Brazil is there? They had, as you mentioned, a very young democracy, decades of oligarchy governments, decades of corrupted governments. Then they have an economic growth, and that gave the opportunity to have, for certain classes, for certain people, a chance to get more corrupted. We are seeing the cases in Petrobras, but also inside the government. And as you mentioned at the beginning, there are many people, even the people that are asking for the impeachment are themselves part of the so-called or alleged corruption related to Petrobras. So it's a very difficult issue, but there's no question that the state of the economy played a very important role.
Mr. Tang, back in the 1990s, another president of yours in Brazil was impeached, but that was mainly based on the corruption charges, his own corruption charges that he was impeached. 20 years, more than 20 years later, things seem to have the possibility of repeating itself. But what would this mean this time? Because Mr. Rousseff is coming from the Workers' Party. It is the Workers' Party, many of those that were fighting against the military government before hers, and eventually won the success of running a new political system inside your country. Secondly, it seems that the alternative either has the vice president of the same party or the third place, who is now the head of the lower house, who mainly pushed for this impeachment test against her, are not necessarily, at least according to international opinions, the best choices. Of course, it's all decided by the Brazilians themselves, but what do you make of the current situation? Is one situation better than the other, or the other way around?
Well, the New York Times article said that the a person who's until now not proven guilty of any corruption herself is being judged by people who are have been tainted by corruption. However, you know, Brazil wants democracy, but it never created a transparent, above-board system to finance this democracy. So most politicians have to turn into, you know, under the table money to become elected for their campaigns. And I think that until that is resolved, we will still have endemic corruption in Brazil, because people need the money for their campaigns to be elected. Now, a lot of people who voted for the impeachment would like to have a new hope and a new dream. However, I don't think just the mere substitution of the president will resolve Brazil's problems. I think that the problems are going to begin now.
Mr. Seligman, this is already a very urgent matter. On the one hand, it's a political crisis inside your country in Brazil, but on the other hand, Brazil has its international commitment. Just in a few months, the Olympics is going to be held over there. And also you have this enormous amount of economic crisis, plus with things like the Zika virus, you know, an immediate threat. So all of things mixed together, Brazil's domestic political struggle vis-a-vis its international responsibilities and long-term vision and goals. What do you make of the current political situation? Is there a better way out?
Well, I think that that's why we need a government as soon as possible. And yesterday, we saw that Ms. Rousseff do not have the support to government and to run the government. So that's the main reasons for the results that we saw yesterday. For the international commitments, I think that the Olympic Games will be very well done, because it's due and it's organized by the City Hall. It's very well organized, and I am very optimistic on the results. The other questions involving health and involving all the things that Brazil is committed in, commerce and other things, I think that you need to restart the government, and the way that we have in our constitution is to impeach the president if following all the rules, and the vice president elect in the same elections take the position.
All right. I see. Mr. Tang, this is not just an issue about Brazil. This is also about the BRICS economy and the BRICS as a group in the future. Brazil is one of the pillars of the BRICS economies, especially from South America. What do you make of Brazil's case this time for the prospect of BRICS as a whole?
Well, I think that Brazil is a very wealthy country, and Brazil has every possibility, once there is a stable government in place, to recover its economic growth. So my personal feeling is that I do bet on Brazil. And, you know, right now the political uncertainties have also helped cause the economic recession in the country. Actually, it started when the opposition decided not to accept the President Dilma's election and started boycotting a lot of her measures.